Welcome in, everyone. We've got another episode of the Even Your Dynasty show, and we've got a special guest today. Mr. Jeff Young's in the house, and he's gonna drop some knowledge on everybody, and we're gonna talk some little bit of Giants baseball.
Right on. Yeah, I'll try and talk Giants baseball on it. If not, I'll just kind of I'll kind of wing it. I'll fake it. Fake it
Yeah,
till you make it is one of my favorite phrases.
There you
yeah,
go.
there we go. I see everybody's kind of starting to filter in here. We'll
Great.
get going here in a second, but I'll start off. I'll let Jeff kind of introduce himself as what he does. I know you have the Pitchers Park podcast that you started with Brooke Knudsen and Around the Foghorn, and I know you edit for Fansided. I think that's in your bio as well.
Yeah, so I mean that's the phrase that they give us. We're the editor of the site. I'm the site expert. I'm the editor of Around the Foghorn. So that's kind of the title that they give us. I've been writing for Around the Foghorn for 6, 7, 8 years now. I think I started in 2017, so it's been a while. I was very excited to bring on Nick, who as a site expert, co-site expert earlier this season. He does a really good job. So, I hope everyone gets a chance to check it out. And then Brooks and I started up a podcast, took over the McCovey Chronicles podcast actually, and kind of rebranded it. So, yeah, I mean that's been fun as well. We just kind of a different forum to put out some Giants content and just really, baseball is my passion. Giants baseball is my passion. So doing these things kind of feeds that. So it gives me a lot of excitement to do it. And it gives me excitement to chat with you guys tonight.
Yeah, appreciate having you, man. We love just getting anybody we can to talk Giants baseball with. So, and you're obviously someone that I enjoy following a lot on Twitter, X, whatever we want to call it nowadays. I mentioned in the green room, obviously, you post some of my favorite like Bob Uecker references from Major League and things like that. But also, like, I enjoy the fact that you have a very, kind of rational way of looking at the team, and it's not all analytics. It's not all, kind of old school baseball. It's very much just kind of a rational way and looking at a lot of things objectively. And that's something that we, strive to do a lot of on this channel, is just be as objective and, use all the information available. So,
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have like the analytical background, I guess. When you talk to people who work in front offices, not just the person who runs the front office, like everyone has like a mathematical economics background, and I can't say that's like been my background. I've just kind of picked this stuff up on the fly, learning analytics. It feels like every year I have to like learn a new stat or a couple of new stats and learn how to interpret it and learn how to like present it to people. It'd be nice if baseball could just like take a season off and be like, yeah, you know what, we're fine with all these stats we have, and we're gonna keep it simple for a season. But every year it's like, okay, well, what's X WOBA again? I forget. Like I
Right.
have to look it up. And what's a good X WOBA? I have no idea.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't have the analytical background. I played a lot of baseball growing up. I played a tad bit in college. I played for an adult league as well after college for quite a few years. So yeah, I mean, I think just my experience in baseball just comes from A, playing the game, and then B, kind of picking up kind of the analytic side as we go. So I try to keep it as balanced as possible and not get too analytical, even though I know there's definitely times where I do so, but that's just par for the course sometimes.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in, Jeff, because I just wanted to touch on that and emphasize that, because that's one of the things I respect about you, not to be a kiss ass or anything, but I have been a big fan of yours for about 5 years now. So it's always been cool to see that nice fine balance there from, an unbiased source to an extent on X, such as yourself. So I just want to shout you out for that, because you just said what I was going to say as far as that balance is concerned with your work. So kudos to you, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dan. My goal is always to try and be as objective as possible when it comes to covering Giants. Like it's okay, and I feel like I've like grown in that sense over the past few years, and I don't want to just talk about me tonight, but
Yeah,
this
we'll move on.
yeah, this is a nice introduction, but I feel like I try to like a couple of years ago I felt like I was probably a little too much of like a fan or just like and that's okay too. But I tried to really become a little more objective to the point where it's like, hey, it's okay to be critical of the team and what they're doing and how they're doing it. Like I just try to find that balance where it's like it's not overly critical, but it's not overly complimentary as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just being fair, that's all it is. But
I think it's the best way to kind of approach
yeah.
the Giants in particular, which is it's going to be a few topics we're going to touch on tonight to get your input in. Cody and I have our own thoughts and views and opinions on things. It'd be cool to get get yours as well.
For sure.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear you guys your guys' opinions as well. So let's make this a two-way conversation.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. So yeah, and first thing we'll get it kicked off with is, one of the big things that I tried to do this year, and I know you post them almost nightly. You'll post the like the updates on like how the prospects did, like what guys do, and I love seeing that. And it was one of those things that I felt like was kind of lacking around. Is if you look around different podcasts and different shows and things like that, there's just not a ton of people that kind of put stuff out, letting people know how, different players have looked down there and, all kinds of different things. So it was something that I started this year, was doing like a weekly update and, put some highlights out there and telling people what I'm seeing. Cause I just put baseball on basically all day, every day.
Same here.
It's true. He does.
Yeah.
I'm just like, hey, did you guys see Bo Davidson? And they're like, what? But
he's like, you need to find a hobby, but the sad thing is that is your hobby, right?
Exactly. So
I do the same thing.
Yeah, but you being a big guy that covers a ton of minor league stuff, we just wanted to kind of get your thoughts, both I guess kind of on the Giants system as a whole. Like I know that they're ranked pretty low on a lot of different ranking systems, but are there any prospects that, and we'll exclude Bryce from this because I think everybody's pretty excited about him, but are there any prospects that you're super high on? Doesn't necessarily have to be like a super highly rated guy, or like any players in particular that really you're looking forward to seeing next season?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's one guy that stands out who is really like the pop-up prospect in organization this year, and it's a reliever named Trent Harris. He was an undrafted free agent. He signed for like $10,000 last year. So for him to even he reached AA this year in his first pro season. For him to even reach AA is quite an accomplishment because he doesn't have the draft pedigree to kind of rely on. You see guys that they're top picks and they kind of get pushed up a little quicker than some other guys because that's just their draft pedigree. That's not necessarily the entire motivation for it, but you see guys sometimes who are first, second, third round picks who just move up, even though their performance or their underlying numbers or their profile doesn't really match that the promotion that they're getting. But with Trent Harris, he's had to kind of pitch the every step of the way. He started the year in San Jose and just he spent most of the year in the lower minors and just really kind of bullied the hitters. He's a mid-90s four-seam fastball. He knows how to use it up in the zone. Good swing and miss pitch against lower minor league hitters. He has a really good curveball, and I think he has a slider as well. That's his third pitch. And it'd be interesting to see if the Giants could try and stretch him out as a starter. I know that's at least an idea that's been kind of considered. But right now he's working under the bullpen. It would not surprise me if he received a camp invite next year. So somebody to watch out for is Trent Harris. I really liked watching him. Just a guy who is way above the competition level that he faced for much of the year. So it was pretty exciting to see.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I got the impression watching Harris this season. I when he was still in Eugene, I remember mentioning at one point saying, I think this guy ends up in the Giants bullpen by the end of next season. Like, I really think he's going to push quick. I felt like, a guy like Reggie Crawford, I felt like was going to be in the pen this season had he stayed healthy, but obviously that unfortunately didn't happen. But, like you said with Harris, he's got a pretty explosive arm and he's a bit older too. I think he's 26.
He is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another reason he's probably going to move pretty quickly. I mean, he finished the year in Double-A, so he's already moved quickly through the system. But given the age and all that, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, to your point, Cody, that if he pitches out of the bullpen by the end of next season, relievers can move quick. I think I'm trying to think of like Randy Rodriguez. Maybe that's not a good example. Spencer Bivens only had a couple of months in AAA before he was promoted. Relievers can just generally move quick. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah. I mean, we saw McDonald move pretty fast, even though they were using him as a starter. But I mean, and that's actually, I want to hear your thoughts on, I'm going to use Trevor McDonald as an example because I see his stuff and I think he could be a pretty high end reliever if they stuck him to that. And I know they're trying to stretch him out as a starter, and he's shown some really good solid things as a starter. I have serious concerns with the way he throws, like how much his arm will hold up. He has like a lot of that, what is it, pronation, and I know he's already had some injury history, and I watch that and it just like terrifies me that if they're going to try and let him stretch it out, he's just going to have a bunch of arm injuries pile up on him. So I'm just kind of wondering what you think of a guy like him.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, he's still on the younger side. He was a high school pick in 2019, 11th round pick, signed for a pretty significant sum. I think I think teams try to exhaust starting pitching. They try to stretch that out for as long as they can. And with Trevor McDonald, I mean, he's generally, at least for the past couple of years, he did miss some time earlier in his pro career. And I can't remember what the injury was. I don't think it was Tommy John, but I forget, but I know he missed some time. But the past couple of seasons, he's performed pretty well out of the rotation. He has a legit, 4-pitch mix for, I think, a back end starter. But he doesn't have that true like plus pitch, in my opinion. He has a really good curveball. He's got pretty decent command. He's able to mix up the sight lines a little bit against hitters, and I mean I just think for now he's still performing as a starter. It'd just be interesting to see how he looks in Sacramento, because they did push him up because he was on the 40-man roster this year. That was kind of the basis for why he spent such a little time in Double-A. Once you're on the 40-man roster, that really accelerates your development. So with him, I think it's like, well, let's just see what he can do in Sacramento. But, to your point, there's a good chance that, he has enough to become a reliever if the Giants kind of exhaust that option. He's got a decent fastball curveball mix, and I think, he doesn't overpower, but he's kind of got the stuff, and that's kind of what some bullpens, I guess, are shifting away from just high-powered velocity to, somebody who has a really good pitch that they can, a really good out pitch. And I think McDonald has that with his curveball.
For sure.
Yeah. I've been seeing a lot of people recently, because I know with I'm gonna shift over to like Carson Wisenhunt as an example.
Sure.
That's a guy that obviously, he struggled this season. Now I always try and point out to people, I go, hey, the PCL is super difficult to pitch in. Look at his home road splits. Like at home, he was pretty dominant in Sacramento, and on the road, it was a really rough go for him this season. But a lot of people have kind of mentioned, could he be this just dominant lefty coming out of the pen, especially with that changeup? And, a lot of people look at like a guy like Devin Williams as an example, as a guy that just has, awesome changeup that it dominates in a closer role. And I want to know your thoughts. I'm not necessarily saying, do you think he's going to end up in the pen or anything, but kind of what you saw out of him this year. I mean, I know I'm pretty obvious. The changeup, I think, could be one of the better pitches in all of baseball the second he sets foot on a major league mound. But the other pitches that he's featuring are kind of, and the command definitely raised some concerns from what I've watched.
Yeah, it did. And to your point, the PCL is just a tough place to pitch in. The home road splits were a real thing for Wisenhunt. When you look at, he pitched at Sutter Health Park, which is probably one of the fairer, if not the fairest ballpark in a PCL. But it's really hard to evaluate, a pitcher when he's on the road because the elevation is so different. I'm thinking of like Salt Lake City and Albuquerque, and there's a couple of other spots where it's like, well, you can't really judge. It's hard for me to judge the movement on some of his pitches when it's like, well, I mean, how much is that? Is that just a lack of consistency issue, or is it just, the fact that he's pitching at a higher elevation and there's, it's a different movement that's taking place? And it was pretty apparent that Wisenhunt just, he was a different pitcher, on the road, and his changeup didn't play quite as well, but he still struck out a healthy number of batters. So, I mean, that's encouraging. I think for him, the next step in his development is there's a couple of steps at least. One, being able to refine his control, because he did show pretty decent control from the starts I saw in the lower minors. Once he got to AAA, it really, became more of an issue. And then secondly, he needs to have confidence in the third pitch. He doesn't need to throw it, at 20 or 30% of the time, but I think he has a curveball that's his kind of third pitch, but it's a below average pitch. It doesn't really have the two plane break, or sorry, not the two plane. I'm thinking of a slider. It doesn't really have like the 12-6 movement or anything like that. It doesn't get a lot of swinging strikes. And I think it's just important for him to be able to have confidence and be able to throw a third pitch, because, if you're going to be a starter, some guys can get away with having two pitches. And I think he has a pretty decent fastball. It sits in the mid 90s, low to mid 90s from the left side is, that's pretty good. And with his changeup. But, if you're going to be a two pitch guy, you really have to have two plus pitches. And he definitely has that with his changeup, but his fastball is not quite at that level. So it's really just being able to keep hitters honest, especially right-handed hitters, to be able to have that kind of, be able to pitch in that platoon matchup. To, changeups typically are good against trying to think of like a platoon matchup. Like if you're a lefty throwing to a righty, a changeup's usually a pretty good option. But I'm trying to think like what he really needs. But it's a third pitch. So kind of a long-winded way of saying he needs to throw a third pitch more consistently for strikes.
It makes me think of like when I watch Birdsong, I saw a few people like harp on his slider and things like that. And I'm like, it's similar with Wisenhunt that I see with the slider when Birdsong kind of throws that out there. It's like, to me, it's a different movement. It's something to steal a strike from time to time, show them something different. So they at least have to have it in the back of their head. You just got to throw it enough that they think it might come. And if they're not sitting on it, maybe they roll one over or something or pop one up. I mean, I always just wonder with the fastball, because I know a lot of people have mentioned it's kind of like flatter. It's not, it's not the greatest pitch. And I just wonder if he'd be better off trying to like cut it a little more, or, two seam it a little bit and try and get some sink. Like I don't know what the answer is. I do feel like he needs to tweak it a little bit, like you mentioned, but hopefully they can figure out what the best way to approach that is.
Yeah. To your point about Birdsong, I mean, the thing that obviously stood out to me was the ability to strike out major league hitters. He definitely showed that in his brief time with the Giants. The control was, they rushed him through the minors. There was no surprise that he struggled to throw strikes as much as he did. But I think he showed a pretty good, fastball, curveball, changeup combination there. The slider was probably lagging a little bit, but to kind of create a different movement, or to show a different movement profile to the curveball, I think that's really the intent behind it. And it's not, I think he has three pretty decent pitches, so it's not really a pitch he's going to rely on all that much. But for him, it's just, it's being able to just throw strikes. He has the stuff. I mean, he has a four seam fastball that he can throw up in the zone and get a lot of strikes, swinging strikes. He has a curveball that's pretty tough to hit. The changeup as well. Really, it's just about just being able to hit the strike zone a little more consistently. I think he's, I liked what I saw from him this year. And it wasn't surprising that he walked as many hitters as he did. It's just, it's part of the development process. He was only 22 years old when he debuted. So no one's really a finished product at that age, except for like a Juan Soto.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. I know it was funny with Birdsong. When I'd watch him in the minors, and for a while I said that's my favorite pitcher in their system. Like any level. Like when I was watching him in Richmond this year, I kept saying, I was like, this is my favorite pitcher in their system. I think he's going to be the best of the bunch. I love his pitch mix as a whole. You know, he's a true 4-pitch guy. Even if the slider's not the greatest, like he can still throw it in any count. And I like that he has the confidence to throw any pitch in any count. I think anytime you have that, even if your control is not the greatest, if you at least have the confidence to throw any pitch, like you can keep guys off balance. And it cracked me up because I remember watching him. I don't remember who he was facing. It was like one of the first games in spring training, and he bounced a changeup like a foot in front of home plate, and a guy waved at it and for a strikeout. And throughout the season in the minors, I kept saying, I was like, I feel like his changeup could actually be his best pitch. And I couldn't figure out if it was a splitter or if it was like a circle change. Like, I don't know what it was, but anytime he did throw it, if he got a swing, they were always ugly on that pitch. But he hardly threw it in the minors. And then as soon as he got up to the majors, I don't know if it was Patrick Bailey or, Price or whoever saw something in that and was like, dude, this is your best pitch. But it was pretty crazy that they, the second he gets to the majors, all of a sudden it becomes like one of his most featured pitches, and they figure out this is probably your best pitch to get guys out. And I just thought it was super funny that they almost hid that changeup.
What was the percent
minor league?
What was the percent of changeups he threw this season? Wasn't it like towards the top of the league? I think Cody, I think you sent us a screenshot of it or something a couple weeks back once the season ended.
Oh God.
But just I remember that being in particular. You pointed it out early in the beginning of the season. Yeah. So when it kind of came to fruition, that was kind of cool to see.
Yeah, I'm seeing about 8%. He threw it at 88.1 miles per hour, which is, 20 years ago, that was a pretty decent fastball, but that's not a bad changeup.
But hey, Jeff, I wanted to get your opinion on this. It's a little bit more vague, but still relating more towards the system.
Sure.
So I work with Bleacher Report for the last 3 years, and they put out an article at the end of the season basically saying the Giants have the worst farm system in all of baseball. I don't agree with that per se. Cody doesn't agree with that per se. We think it's more middle of the pack. I just want to get your opinion on exactly. I just want to see what your opinion was. If you think it's absolutely the worst in the league, or if you think there's some promise in there.
Yeah, I mean, I always find it hard to evaluate the farm system because I just I don't know, Cody, if you have the same issue, but like I'm so focused on the Giants that like I don't really see any other farm system. Like I see the guys if they're playing the Giants prospects. They're playing the Giants affiliates, but I just see the Giants. Like I know from experience, tracking the Giants farm system for a long time now, I kind of know what the worst farm system looks like. And I don't think the Giants are quite there yet. They have plenty of upside. There's plenty of high risk prospects in their organization who may or may not, turn out. Nobody knows what's going to happen with Reggie Crawford, but if he stayed healthy, he'd be, he'd be one of the better left-handed pitchers in the minors. But that's been, being able to stick on the mound's been an issue. So I don't know if I agree with, the 30th ranked farm system. I can't really say it's any it's not like the Red Sox. It's not the Dodgers. So, I mean, I think anywhere in the 20s feels somewhat appropriate. They have guys. They just are light on the top end talent right now. I think if you go back to about 5-6 years ago, they didn't have the top end talent. And they didn't really have like the role players either. They had some role players in their system. And I think that raises kind of where they're at in my opinion. So, I wouldn't say 30th, but if somebody said 23rd, I probably wouldn't have an argument for or against it. I mean, I'd probably say that sounds about right.
So with that being said, just we popped up Grand's comment here. Based on what you've seen, obviously excluding Eldridge, me and Cody view Eldridge as an untouchable prospect. But do you think the rest of the pack, do you think there's some wiggle room as far as, enough strength to be able to make some moves in the offseason with some of those guys?
Yeah, I don't know, with some of the guys like Carson Whisenhunt, maybe a year ago had, his stock was rising. His stock obviously fell for probably just pitching in the PCL. That's one example. I don't know if they have a farm system to really trade from. It's just, it's kind of been like this for a few years where it's like it's almost kind of getting there where they could trade a prospect or two. They could probably trade from their pitching depth, but I don't know if that's going to get you like a top asset in return. But they certainly have some pitchers to trade from. I'm thinking like, Landon Group looked good this year. He has some, he has some upside. Keaton Wynn, if he could stay healthy, he has a really good splitter. There's some upside there. At some point soon, they're going to have too many starting pitchers for the rotation. And, they're probably going to have to trade from that depth. So I think if they're going to trade, it's probably going to be from the pitching side. I don't know if that's going to get you all that much. It might, but it just, I can't think of a scenario where they would, they get like an everyday player for, some of the pitching capital that they have in their farm system right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you touched on the pitching side, but I think another position that seems kind of crowded in the farm and, on the team in general is the outfield, especially, like we've been touching on for a while. You've got, Matos is kind of drowning in Sacramento. You've got McRae, who just got brought up. Now they're saying that they want to move Luciano out there. They obviously just drafted Tibbs. It's getting kind of crowded real quick. So I was even, speculating with Cody earlier today. Like, is it possible to move, like a Tibbs potentially in the near future, depending on how, the outfield shapes up going into opening day next year? Just thinking that's another position here where it when you're looking at the major league roster, you think that there's a possible hole in right field that you need to address, but then you look at the team as a whole and you're like, well, the outfield's super crowded. So how do you go about addressing that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I'd be surprised if Tibbs was the guy that they moved just because they drafted him 6 months ago. It's not super common for teams to trade like a first round pick within the first year or so. They like to let those guys kind of breathe and develop. Kind of to your point, I mean, somebody like Luis Matos could be kind of the odd man out, and it'd be, I think the Giants would have to be really confident in their evaluation here because he looked really good in 2023. He looked like a much different hitter in 2024. But, when you start looking at his offensive profile and where he fits defensively, I think there's a conversation to be had as to whether, he doesn't hit for enough power to be a corner outfielder. I think that's a pretty fair statement. He also really doesn't play defense well enough to be a center fielder. I think that's where his bat probably better profiles. So it's like he's kind of in between, in between profiles. And maybe that's just one of those things where a team like the Marlins is like, well, we have plenty of at bats for you. We'll let you kind of figure it out. I don't know who the Giants would trade from that team. I'm just throwing a team out there, but that's one name I could see the Giants trying to move. It's definitely a crowded bunch. I know a guy like Mike Yastrzemski gets kind of a lot of criticism, but there isn't really anyone I've seen aside from Elliot Ramos who has proven to really be definitively better than Yastrzemski right now. And that's a problem because Yastrzemski is good, but he's probably you probably want him to be your third best outfielder. Right now, he's probably the Giants' second best outfielder, depending on how Jung-Hoo Lee develops, of course. But yeah, I mean, none of the guys that came up this year, the young guys, Grant McRae had the massive strikeout spike. I mean, that's something that has to get under control. Luis Matos struggled pretty badly. No one knows how how Marco Luciano is going to look in outfield. So there's a lot of options out there, but there's no one that I'm like, oh, that guy's an everyday starter. I mean, I'm saying this with the exception of Ramos and Lane. Those guys are two guys that the Giants probably see as two of their three starting outfielders.
Yeah, to touch on what you just said regarding Yaz, I mean, that's been one of mine and Cody's biggest gripes for, the majority of this year and going back to last offseason. It's like Yaz is a solid ball player. Mind you, he's going to his age 35 season. He's been a solid Giant. He'll get you, decent offensive production, above average to really, really good defensive production. But the thing is that it's not one of those things that takes the team to the next level. You know what I mean? He's not one of those players that's going to elevate your lineup to that, possible contender. So we've always kind of viewed it as one of those things where there's, the need to potentially upgrade the right field position just so you can kind of get over that 500 hump. But the options are kind of thin where it's at because, like you said, we have a lot of depth as far as the outfield position is concerned, but not enough talent, if it makes sense, to be able to make Yaz replaceable or expendable. So it kind of puts the team into a weird position.
I've always said he's not really the problem, but he's also not really the solution either.
Exactly. Like I know people like to put the spotlight on him. I'm like, well, it's not him batting fifth. That's the issue. It's the fact that the Giants don't have anyone better to bat fifth in their lineup. So I'm a little surprised that the Giants didn't find a way to move him at the trade deadline because, you look around baseball. I mean, like the Yankees, like of course, obviously no one's going to say he's Aaron Judge or Juan Soto, but when you look at their third outfield position, it's like, well, Mike Yastrzemski could have been an upgrade there. You look at like the Seattle Mariners with all the offensive problems they had, a guy like Yastrzemski or Conforto, they could have helped. Lane Thomas was traded. A guy who I see as pretty comparable to Yastrzemski, and I think the Nationals got pretty good value in that deal, and I think the Guardians got pretty good value as well, and Lane Thomas is under the same contract as Yastrzemski is right now. I think he's heading into his final year of arbitration, so a little surprised that they weren't able to move him, but I guess they were trying to still kind of weirdly go for it, even though they didn't really look the part for much of the season.
Yeah. I've always, you brought up the Yankees. I actually think Yaz would be like if they were to bring Soto back, which I mean, all signs point to he'll probably be in New York with one of those two teams, it seems. But assuming they were to bring him back, like I look at a team like the Yankees and I feel like Yaz would be an excellent fit there. You could move Soto to left. You could put Yaz in right, or whichever one's more difficult in New York. I really don't know off the top of my head. But like you could put him out there, and I think he's an upgrade over Verdugo. And like he's perfect when he has guys that can carry the lineup, and you can, like you said, kind of push him down to 6th or 7th, and he doesn't have these huge expectations thrown on him to be a run producer or anything. He can just do his thing, play defense, knock 20 out, and drive in 70 runs and call it good. Like that's what they want out of him.
I mean, I think that's I think the Yankees kind of struggled through that with Verdugo and Trent Grisham. Those were their third and fourth outfielders. So I mean, I thought he'd be a pretty good fit there too. There's a number of teams where I think he would have been a pretty decent fit. I think even like the Dodgers, as weird as that sounds. Not that the Giants would trade within the division, but the Dodgers certainly needed some help in outfield too. So it's just a little strange that they weren't able to find. Maybe they didn't try to trade him. Who knows? But there were certainly teams who could have used him.
With that being said, I want to pivot that and transition into another topic here that we were going to bring up, but it kind of fits perfect with that because we noticed that as well. It was a little odd, and it's been kind of the theme of the Giants over the Farhan Zaidi tenureship as far as, not being aggressive enough at the deadline. We've seen those weird moves, the Mark Mathias, the AJ Pollock moves, stuff like that. And, and then touching into the offseason where obviously Giants fans have been disappointed as far as, not landing the Harpers, the Judges, the Otanis, moves like that over the years. I just want to get your opinion because Cody and I have been very, very vocal about our opinion on the Farhan Zaidi tenureship and how, that era was. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted it to work out for Farhan Zaidi. I always felt like it was like one or two players away from clicking. But after 6 years, the Giants had all the information they needed to make an evaluation on him and part ways. So that part to me always kind of made sense. I think one thing he, left the Giants with is, there aren't too many albatross contracts that were present when he took over the roster. Where there was like guys like Jeff Samardzija and Johnny Cueto and Mark Lawrence, and there isn't as much of that. And there's a lot of flexibility. A lot of the contracts fall off pretty much every every year. Like 1/3 of the contracts fall off the book. So I think he always did a nice job in kind of like that creating that flexibility. Of course, that was also kind of frustrating because you look at a guy like, it'd be great to have Blake Snell on a 6-year, $150 million contract, but now, it's 1 year and he's probably going to opt out and sign elsewhere. So there was some frustration there too, and I get that. But I always wanted it to work out for him. I know he tried to get the top guys in the market. I think he, for one reason or another, it didn't work. Really, it comes down to, building a contender, because that's what players want to play for. That's why Shohei Ohtani, went to the Dodgers. The Giants didn't miss out on Ohtani last offseason. They missed out in the years leading up to it, not building a competitive team that, a top free agent wanted to play for. Of course, I think they've kind of shifted that narrative to some extent with Matt Chapman, who's not quite at that star level, but he's also pretty damn good as well. So not terribly surprising that they moved on from him. It's I think there was hope that he would be able to build up the farm system, and it just never really got to that point where the farm system was feeding the major league roster impact talent. And you look at some of the drafts that he oversaw, the 2019, the 2021, and there's just a lot of misses there. It's unfortunate. It's hard to say. I don't like playing the game of like, well, they should have drafted player X over Y, because it's always hard to tell at the moments, who's going to be a star and who's not. But like when you reflect back on it and see the value that other teams picking after them got, it's like, well, something went wrong in the evaluation process for them to go with player X instead of player Y. Like, it's I think it was time to move on. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah. I it's hard because like, in a vacuum, like every guy's going to miss picks. Like they all do. And, so I don't sit there and like gripe constantly about like, oh, he took Hunter Bishop over Corbin Carroll, or anything like that in particular. It's just like when you consistently top out at like a B pick, especially in the early rounds, it gets really tough. And then, maybe Bryce Eldridge ends up being that guy that we've all been waiting for. But, when it comes in it was his 5th draft, like when it comes in year 5 and he's still not going to be here till maybe next year sometime, it's tough to keep the guy around. And I always felt like he was excellent at building spots 6 through 26 on a roster, or filling out those spots on a roster. Not great at filling out the top 5. And unfortunately that top 5 is really what makes you either a contender or not around baseball. And I think he's an excellent number 2 is the way I look at Farhan Zaidi. I think he's going to get a job really quick, and he's a great number 2 that can find value in a lot of different players, and he has value to a front office. I just question whether or not he really had the guts to lead an organization where he has to make some very difficult decisions and make some big risks and things like that. And I just, I just, maybe it's having a little bit of bias watching Sabian run the club for so long, where he was not afraid to put his chips on the table in a trade ever. And some blew up in his face, but a lot worked out for him. And then Farhan was kind of the opposite of that. He made almost 0 big impact trades. I mean, the Chris Bryant one to me was a gimme, because you didn't really trade anyone that was like the top of your prospect list or anything like that. I mean, Canario, a lot of people like, but he was, I think, ranked 9th at the time. So, you weren't giving up a arm and a leg for the guy. So it's just tough. That was just kind of my thoughts watching him. I wish he would have put, you said there weren't any albatross contracts out there, but it's hard because it's like I wish he would have just at least once pushed his chips into the table a little bit on one of these guys. And I think there were guys out there that he could have gotten, even in free agency, a guy like Marcus Simeon, for example, who notoriously grew up a Giants fan, is from San Francisco, and it's like they didn't even pursue him.
And you look at the deal he got, and it's like, man, I think it was like 7 years, 175 million. I think when he signed that deal, my thought was like, that's a pretty good deal. And then like a day later, they signed Corey Seager for like 10 years and 325 million. And I was like,
that's okay,
that could, that obviously that paid off because they won a World Series, but I'm like, that could kind of backfire. But Simeon is a guy who I'm like, okay, that feels pretty reasonable for what he signed for a guy who's just really, really good all around. Kind of like Matt Chapman in a way, where it's just like, he's not this. Marcus Simeon's been like a top 3 MVP player, so maybe that's not the right comparison, but somebody who doesn't really command the attention in the way that some stars do, but a guy who's just every day, like, impacts the ball on all sides. He's a good base runner, good defensively, good hitter. But yeah, it would take a long time to dissect Farhan Zaidi's tenure. I think he always did well in trades, but he never really made any big trades. So it's like he almost like never lost the trade, but he also never really made a trade of. He never made many trades of substance, just because of like where he was, the part of the market where he was like making those trades. It was always like off the 40, around the back end of the 40-man roster, guys in minor league deals, like all that stuff. So he was really never in a position to lose a trade. I don't think he really did. But yeah, to your point, it would have been nice for him to be aggressive and it's when you like when I reflect on some of these deals, like I thought guys like, and this is me being naive now, with hindsight, but I was like, Mitch Haniger was a pretty good player when the Giants signed him, and Michael Conforto had a really nice career up until the year before he had the shoulder surgery. It's a little surprising that these deals didn't work out the way. Conforto did fine this year. He wasn't bad. He wasn't good, as I thought. He wasn't great. He was fine. But Haniger, like him just like falling flat immediately, that kind of surprised me. And some of his contracts, I expected better results, and it just, for one reason or another, it didn't work out.
Yeah, and I think I'll kind of touch on a couple points that you guys made. Because when it comes to the Farhan tenureship and the Farhan era in particular, like you said, it's not that he lost on many trades, because the most notable trades that you look at are moves that he made to acquire players, like Lamont Wade Jr. and, the Wilmer Floreses and, moves like those where they're good for what their roles are, but they don't elevate the team to that next level. They're good, solid role players for what they do. So yes, you can call that a win. And then you go into free agency, like you just touched on, where you got these big name, free agents out there that the Giants have been after every offseason. And like you said, what is the one thing that they look for? They look for a roster that's built to contend. And so it's like, well, yes, Farhan's made these good moves in perspective, but they're not good enough as far as building a roster that can contend for a World Series. So of course it's not going to be an attractable destination for a free agent, especially if you're going after a slugger in a park such as Oracle. So it was just that consistent, he got Lamont Wade and he got Wilmer Flores. Yes, he got those, but that's not building, the team that you need to attract these free agents. So you're stuck in this limbo consistently.
Yeah. And on a lighter note, it's kind of funny how many of the playoff starters this year have had Giants ties. You see Alex Cobb, Matthew Boyd, who never made an appearance for the Giants. Sean Manaea's had a really nice one. A much more minor name, but Tobias, is it Tobias Myers? Tobias Myers. He pitched an elimination game for the Brewers. He was on the Giants 40-man roster for a month in 2021 or 2022. I forget which year it was, but he had that eye for talent. It just like it didn't come together during the time with the Giants. So it's yeah.
It's almost some, in some cases, it's almost a lack of conviction on some guys. Like he just
Sure.
constantly had to tinker.
Yeah.
And, you see a guy like Sean Mania who came in, and granted, I mean, for the first 5-6 weeks or whatever of 2023, it looked like he was throwing a beach ball out there to hitters because guys were just teeing off on him. But, he jumped ship on him as a starter so fast. And it's like, you were right. Like you got a guy that had value and showed that he could be really good. You just didn't have the conviction to stick it out. And I don't know if it was fan pressure or what that, or if it was just him kind of overthinking things. It was pretty tough. Like I saw it to me, like I looked at a guy like Joey Bart this season, who I thought would have been just a perfect guy to hold on to with Bailey. And I get the rationale behind moving on from him. I felt like if you were going to do it, get a strong, me personally, I always feel like in my backup catcher, I want a strong defender first and foremost. And Tom Murphy is kind of the opposite of that. And that's why I was very outspoken against that move. But I just felt like Bart was a guy that just watching him, and I know the metrics don't always back it up, but just watching them as someone that used to play the position, like I felt like he was at least steady back there and he was solid and improving defensively. And then some of the offensive stuff, like he had cut down on a lot of the whiffs, like the strikeout rate was coming down, and he didn't hit for any power in 2023. But to me, it was like, it'd be foolish to think this guy just lost all his power in a season. Like he's made, to me, with the improved contact rates and everything, it wasn't that surprising that he broke out for Pittsburgh. That was just my personal view. Like I figured it was a matter of time before the power would show out again. And it was a bummer that they moved on. I've always, and I love how classy he's always been, but you know.
I think one thing that stands out about Zaidi in his tenure was, they kind of square peg round hole development to some extent. They, you saw it with Bart, who immediately took off after the trade. You kind of saw it with Matos and Luciano this year, where it's like Matos, he was pulling the ball way more. He was trying to get so much more lift this year, and it's like that's not playing to his strength. And then Luciano, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it's the the trying to preach the plate discipline, but his he improved in his swing decisions, but like the ability to make impact contact just like disappeared. I mean, he didn't look like the hitter he was a year or two ago. He was still making and I always this is always in the back of my mind. He was still making really hard contact, but it was just like straight into the ground. And you can't really get extra base hits that way. It's hard to get base hits in the first place with when you hit a lot of ground balls. I think it was the same with Joey Bart, where it was just kind of like a square peg round hole development approach, where it's like they're just trying to make him do something he's not. And with the Pirates, I don't know what he did differently, because you look at his batted ball profile, you look at all the stuff. Like I don't know if he cut that. Like Cody, I don't know if you've analyzed it as much as I have. I've just looked at the numbers, the top line numbers. Yeah. But I didn't see anything that stood out that was like, wow, he's a different hitter with the Pirates. It's like, I don't know. I didn't really see anything there. But he hit the shit out of the ball.
Yeah,
something 100%. He hit the shit out of the ball.
Yeah, to me, like he flashed all that power with the Giants at times. Like he would hit some just insane exit velocity, homers, doubles. Like he would just pound some balls, and it just hadn't clicked. And whether it was swing decisions or pitch recognition or whatever the case may be, he swung and missed a ton in 2022. Like we all saw it. Yep. We know, but it was just, to me, to move off a first round, number 2 overall pick that quickly and that little of at bats and that little of time up in the majors. And I get 2023 wasn't what everyone had hoped for, but I always felt like even if the bat never really took the next step, he was a guy that at least could be decent against lefties and be solid behind the plate. And that would have at least gotten Bailey out of the squad a little more, so that way he wouldn't possibly fall off as much as he did for the second straight year in the second half. Because I think it's pretty clear that's one of their needs, is to get, a guy that can play 30% of the games or 35% of the games or something like that. We've been preaching for a guy like Travis d'Arnaud would be perfect.
Yeah.
But
good hitter.
Yeah, and then touching kind of looking at like guys like Luciano, and totally agree. I've actually felt like he's kind of overly passive the last 2
Yeah.
years.
Oh yeah.
Just he gets count leverage, and it just feels like he's not up there looking to drive the ball at times, and it's just frustrating because I'm like, you've got some of the best power in the system, like by a large margin, and I just wish he was up there just trying to drive the ball. And it's like they've just overcorrected him because he used to be a bit of a free swinger. I know when he first came up, and I almost would rather see that because at least he's up there hunting something to do damage with. And totally agree regarding Matos. I don't remember how many times I said it makes me sick every time I see him hit a fly ball to the left fielder. I got more excited over like a simple line drive single to right field than I did over, him hitting a home run in AAA. Dan can attest for that one. I was like, oh my God, he did it. Like every time he did that, because that was the guy I saw in 2023. He sprayed the ball all over the field. He looked awesome. And
honestly, I think it's like instilling confidence in these players.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the biggest things to me. I think that's kind of touched on what both of you guys are saying right now. Yeah. It's, if you're not getting that, sense of confidence from, your front office and your, manager and whatnot, it's like you're not destined to succeed. I mean, we saw when Matos he went from being player of the week to slumping for 2 weeks, and then poof, you're gone. You're banished to Sacramento for, the rest of the season. So it's, that's an example. The Joey Bart platoon for 3 years was an example. The Luciano, mishandling for the year is an example. I just think as soon as you instill confidence in these young guys and just tell them, hey, we want to see you go out there and succeed. We're going to go through the highs and lows with you. Let's see what you got. I think that's when you'll start to see these guys at their best.
Yeah. Great.
And you're right. Like left field, he's probably not a prototypical, corner outfielder by any stretch. I think, a Steven Kwan type would be like the highest end you'd probably see out of a guy like Luis Matos. I mean, he hit 19 or 20 between Sacramento and San Francisco. Like, I feel like, but I watch him and it was kind of funny. This is a very weird comp, but when I watched him in 2023, offensively, I felt like his best case would be like a peak Freddie Sanchez type at the plate. Just hit a ton of doubles, line drives all over the field, hit a bunch of doubles because he has at least enough speed to, stretch out a bunch of extra base hits. So kind of a odd comp offensively, but that's just kind of what I saw. It's just really a different position, obviously, but Freddie, it was just kind of.
I loved Freddie.
Yeah, he was a good hitter.
Yeah, that was another good Sapien trade. So we'll kick over to what are your thoughts kind of on the Posey hire? Do you feel like it's an overcorrection? Do you think it's I obviously a lot is going to hinge on the GM stuff, and we're going to get into the candidates because I know you kind of tweeted about it today. But what just kind of initial reaction to them hiring Posey to be the president and run it?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts here, and I don't know if I could touch on it all, but I mean, overcorrection might be the right phrase. I mean, I found it very interesting and also risky that they decided to hire Posey right away without surveying the outside market whatsoever, because the Giants, like, they're one of the reasons that they're so stale right now as an organization is because they just keep like the same guys in place forever. Like they just like they're not allowing outside voices to really take over and make an impact like some organizations are doing. But the Giants, like I mean, Posey could end up being a great hire, obviously. I mean, he just has that personality about him where he's just like, he may not like fail. He's never failed in anything he's ever done in his life. Why would this be any different? But it would have been nice for the Giants to do their diligence to say, you know what, Posey is the best person that we have. We interviewed a bunch of candidates, a lot of guys who are well regarded. I mean, if they marketed this as a president of baseball operations position, there would have been plenty of interest. So I just, it's to me, it's an overcorrection. I would have liked the Giants to, they did this with Zaidi, and it wasn't the wrong approach, but they got an outside voice to kind of lead the organization. and it didn't work out after 6 years. So like, all right, we're going back to our roots. We're gonna keep it, within the organization going forward. Um, I do think that Posey really has to do a nice job of hiring a really strong general manager. I haven't really seen those candidates be mentioned yet, and who knows? I mean, it's possible that people are interviewing and their names are not being made publicly available yet. I mean, that happens quite a bit. Um, but of the names who have been mentioned, I do like Billy Owens because, it's for, being a Giants fan and kind of seeing what the A's have done over the past couple of decades. It's easy to see kind of his impact there. I know he's been passed up for a couple of GM opportunities, including the Giants in the past. So it'd be interesting to kind of figure out why that's the case. But other than that, it's like these are not the most inspiring general manager candidates. I know a few names have been mentioned. I don't think Sabian's a legitimate candidate. I think he's probably being
Maybe an
discussed more as an advisor. Bobby Evans, same deal. I don't think he's an actual candidate. I think he's being discussed as an advisor. After that, it's like it's really, Deshaun Watson is his name. I think he was with the Nationals
Houston,
previously. I
maybe?
could be wrong. Houston. But again,
don't
like
know.
a guy who
Texas, maybe.
I think they need somebody who's just more modern. And I think that the guys that they're looking at right now are very old school, traditional, guys in scouting, and that's great. But I think they need somebody who kind of understands how baseball is being scouted and developed today, because it's different than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, I'll start off with kind of my feelings on Posey. Like, I never am going to doubt the guy. Just, I think to me, just like you said, he's kind of never failed in anything. So, I mean, maybe he's due, but like, I'm just going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I've always said, like any executive, I usually give him 3 years, and it doesn't mean they need to be like a, World Series contender in 3 years. I just need to see like a clear vision and direction out of the team. And if it looks like it's going, trending upward, and usually that's enough for me. But, I see Posey and I almost like, he makes me think of like John Lynch. Like, I almost feel like maybe, and Lynch is probably more involved, but like, I almost feel like he doesn't want to do the day-to-day stuff. And that's where I think you're totally dead on, where he needs to, it's really important that he hires a good GM, or at least like a good, several people that can work together on, because like you look at the Niners and they had 3 or 4 guys that kind of were right underneath Lynch that he trusted, that all kind of fit different roles. And I think Posey's kind of going to be the tip of the spear, and just like, this is the direction, this is the vision for the club I have, this is what I want to see. And then like, you guys do it, and I'm going to be involved in like trying to make the big bold moves or whatever. But I do kind of wonder with the guys that they're looking at so far. Like you mentioned, Owens, I think Sharp, Deshaun Watson, Logan White, who I know Ricky, you and Ricky have a little bit. He wasn't able to join because he's out. How dare he be playing in the playoffs of some like men's league or something like that. But he really likes Logan White because of a lot of the talent that he's been involved in getting both in LA and San Diego. But these people all have probably very limited backgrounds on negotiations and trades and things like that. So I do wonder if, and like the more the administration side, and I kind of wonder if, and I know they keep mentioning Jeremy Shelley. He's the name that keeps kind of popping up internally. And I wonder if the idea is, have a guy like Shelley in place, have, whether you bring in a Bobby Evans or a Sabian as an advisor or AGM or whatever you want to kind of role you want to kind of give them, where whoever the other GM is actually the one trying to identify talent and all that. And then you have those guys to assist. Yeah, it is. I totally agree. It's kind of a uninspiring list, but I kind of wonder what their goal is, like with how they're going to build their personnel in the executive office.
Yeah, it's a weird one. It feels like, just very, very briefly, feels like this is an organization that needs to be rebuilt from the bottom up.
Yeah,
that's kind of how I see it. And it's like that starts with, getting the right front office in place, and to your point, John Lynch did it. I think he hired Adam Peters right away. That was like his top lieutenant. And then Martin Mayhew was another guy who I think he was pretty well respected in their front office. And there was like one or two other guys who have since found.
Rand Carthon.
Oh yeah, Rod Cawthorn.
He's
or
in
something.
Tennessee now, or something like that. Yeah.
So they had the talent there. That's what Posey really needs to do, is like get that. It's not just one guy. It's like it's really just rebuilding the front office, so that there's people who have expertise in scouting, people who have expertise in development and player development, and so on and so on.
Yeah, I think the way that I kind of view the Posey hiring is very similar to what both you guys are saying, where in my mind, it's going to be one of those things where, let's face it, Farhan was the one to point the finger at for years. Anytime something bad would happen, fire Farhan, Farhan's fault. And so now I think you put a face like Posey in that position where the fan base is going to be a lot more lenient with. And as long as he kind of surrounds himself, if he gets himself a GM such as, Logan White or Billy Owens, who has that scouting background, and then you get an advisor like a Bobby Evans or a Brian Sabian, and then you get obviously Posey, who's well respected by every organization and player that's, around. And you go into, let's say, a negotiation with the three of them, and then you bring along a Logan Webb and a Matt Chapman, to try to make a pitch towards a player. I think if you got a course such as that, it's going to be a lot more appealing. And then that kind of, front office foundation can probably thrive. But I think a lot of it was to, save face as far as, the president role is concerned on the team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So yeah, it definitely will be interesting. And I 100% agree though, when you say they need to get an outside voice. And that's been my biggest thing against, the pushback that I've had when people have said like bring in an Evans or a Sabian. It's like, I'm fine with them in an advisor role, but like, they've got to get an outside voice. And the name I'm going to bring up, because I actually was happy to see that at least currently he's still with the organization, because and it's hard because I know everyone always asks, like, what does Pete Patilla do? Like, when Farhan was here, everyone always asked. And all I could do was like find snippets from different, there's the clip when he was in, Korea watching Jung Hoo Lee's like ceremonial at bat or whatever. And the other like little snips I got were things that he mentioned primarily last season when he was saying how he was going to different affiliates, and he'd spend like a week, and it felt like he was doing a lot of internal scouting of their farm system. And I did love that the second that he showed up, they got way more aggressive promoting players. And it's not to say Scott Harris wasn't doing a good job. Obviously he goes to Detroit and they turn it around pretty quickly, but it was just kind of the philosophy there changed a little bit, or at least shifted. And I loved seeing that with Patilla. And I do think like he is kind of one of those, newer age, analytically driven guys that could be still be an asset to the organization. And I'm curious to see what kind of role they put him in. I wonder if they're going to try and put him into like some kind of player development role or something along those lines. But obviously he'll still probably, interview around the league if anybody's hiring a GM type position, but I'm just curious your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like the organization when Pete Patilla, he'd only been in the role for 2 years. He had that player development background with Astros. He was really well regarded as an assistant general manager there. He had been there. He's still on the young side. He's like 35 or 36, but he had been with the Astros for like a decade before he joined the Giants. So it's a little surprising now with all the turmoil that the Astros front offices have had over the past few years that he didn't really become a general manager there. There could be reasons for that, but I mean, last year in particular, you really saw the development happen with like there was a lot of positive development happening in the farm system. And it's always hard to identify whether that's like just organic or if that's like a function of somebody's influence. It felt like it was Patilla's influence to some degree. It's always hard to like point and say like, yeah, Patilla did that, but he was very aggressive with his promotions. But you saw a lot of guys really take a step forward, I thought, compared to 2022. For example, what felt like quite a few players took a step back. But I'm not sure what happened this year where it just like it was more like treading water. There wasn't, besides Bryce Eldridge and a few other guys, there wasn't as many like developmental steps forward within the farm system. But I think he's somebody that he is an outside voice. He has that analytical mindset. He understands how the game is being developed today. So I think it's good that they're keeping him in his role. It wouldn't be too surprising if another team just decided to, if they already have a president of baseball operations, that they go out and change their GM for one reason or another. That Patillo is one of the guys that gets interviewed. So I think that they left that open, his role open for that reason, so he can kind of interview and see what's out there. But it'd be nice to keep him. I think that's what they said the intent was to do, at least.
Yeah. I'm hoping that they're able to hang on to him, because I do think, just like from what I can gather from the last couple of years, it does feel like there was an improvement on the player development front when he stepped in. So whether it's like you said, whether it's because of him or not, I don't know. But I would love to see that rewarded at least, and that he sticks around. But yeah, so
I was going to say, you look at the drafts from before he came in the picture and after, it's night and day.
I like the last two drafts a lot. In particular, I felt like they went a lot heavier on upside and tools the last 2 years. And, maybe with Tibbs, it's not like the highest end tools, but then they followed it by taking guys like, Dakota Jordan and Jacob Christian and some of these other guys that are, pretty toolsy guys. So I like what they've done the last 2 years in particular. It doesn't mean they're going to work out, but, I like the drafts at least. So.
Yeah, they drafted this year. They drafted a lot of hitters, a lot of guys with, raw power, game power, and good swing decisions, but also guys who really didn't have a strong defensive position. And Tibbs is kind of in that mix. But Dakota Jordan's probably an exception, because I think he's pretty well regarded defensively. But there were a lot of like corner infielders and like left fielders, and guys in that mix, guys who hit for power and make good swing decisions. And there was a lot of that. There was a lot of like, offensive potential upside there. So that, I think that was a pretty nice approach by them. But time will tell. If it,
exactly.
Real quick,
it's all projection with these guys.
It is.
Yeah, I was going to say real quick, Jeff, what are your thoughts on Jacob Christian? We had him on the show about 4 weeks ago. Super cool guy. Just curious, you looked him up at all, or are you familiar with him by any means?
I mean, I'm familiar with him. I think I probably saw a couple of at bats. And I can't say I remember if he played for San Jose this year. I know guys like Robert Hipwell, who I thought looked pretty good in some areas. Xander Darby also looked pretty good as well. I honestly, I can't remember Jacob Christian playing for the San Jose Giants this year. I'm pretty sure he did.
It was about
can't
it was like
remember
20. He had like what 21
at bats maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
between the 2-game playoff they had and the season, might have been 30 at bats total.
Okay,
he did hit one out and a couple extra base hits in there. And
cool.
I know power is kind of his calling card. It was actually kind of funny in the interview. He said he's like, he sees the cove and he's like, I think I could hit one out there. I believe in my power, especially if someone throws one up and I can elevate one the opposite way, because his one home run did come to right center. And he was like, yeah, I think I could put one out in the cove. And we were like, man, I love the confidence. I mean, it's only been done once now. It was like right after Ramos did it. I mean, it might have been like the same week, honestly.
Yeah,
well, that's pretty cool that you guys got the interview on. That's awesome.
Yeah, super cool guy.
Really cool guy. So yeah, for sure. So yeah, we'll kick it over really quick because I don't know how long you have. I know we're not on a time limit on our end, so we're good whenever you are. But what would be like reasonable offseason expectations for you? Like, I know we've kind of touched on needs that the team has. I think it's pretty clear they could upgrade first base. They could upgrade shortstop is obvious, or middle infield, whether you want to keep Fitz at short or not. But, corner outfield, I think is definitely in play. I do think Yaz and all these guys that are arbitration eligible, I think it's safe to assume that they're probably all going to get tendered a contract, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to be back with the club come next season. They might tender a guy like Yaz and move him, or they may just keep him even if they do upgrade out there. What would be some kind of like reasonable targets, expectations, for you going into the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a lot. Like, again, this is just an organization. It's a roster that needs to be kind of overhauled, in my opinion. They have a lot of needs. They probably need a starter. I think that's more of a wants than a need. I think they have a skeleton of a rotation right now. If you think that Jordan Hicks can be a starter in the long term and stick in a rotation, I'm seeing a nod probably. Yeah, no, I mean I'm kind of right there with you.
Maybe a bulk guy.
Yeah, maybe
nothing wrong with it.
Maybe he throws like 15 starts a year and it goes to the bullpen. I'm not sure, but they're paying him a pretty good chunk of change to pitch, and I think it would behoove them to figure out what they need, what he can do out of the rotation. But they could add to the rotation. They probably need at least one middle infielder. They could probably upgrade first base. They probably need a corner outfielder. They might need a DH too. I mean, that's like a lot of things to check off in one off season. They could do it. And I don't really have a feel one way or the other as to what direction the Giants are going to go. But they do have a lot of things to check off. I mean, I think middle infield is kind of the biggest need that they have. The guys like Willie Adames, Hassan Kim. I mean, those guys. There's Willie Adames is going to have a qualifying offer attached to his name. Do the Giants want to sign a guy who rejects a qualifying offer? I mean, there's a case to be made for and against that. Willie Adames is the type of guy where you just kind of throw caution into the wind because he's pretty good. Hassan Kim is having shoulder surgery. How good is he going to look after that? Is he going to get a qualifying offer? I don't really have a feel one way or the other right now. I don't know how you guys feel about the what they're going to do in off season.
Yeah, because I mean, we did a show. What was it, like a week ago, Cody, or a week and a half ago, maybe, breaking down, the off season. Cody literally got all the financials as far as
what's working. Jeff on that one. Pulled up his.
Yeah, that's what I was hinting at right there. We were able to get all of the numbers and break everything down, and as far as where we'd be, as far as under the CBT is concerned,
I think 81 mil, roughly.
Yeah, just roughly. And I mean, a lot of Giants fans, they want Soto, but we know that's not realistic. Cody and I have been really high on Adames. We don't know if that's plausible. You've got, Giants insiders coming out and saying how, Chapman was the big move and we shouldn't really expect much more after that. And, there's been a lot of Hassan Kim talk with the shoulder thing. So it's like the way I look at it and the way that Cody and I have, been very vocal about, you're the only team in the Bay Area. Now it's a huge market, stadium is paid off. You got the whole Mission Rock thing. You got the money to spend.
Oh yeah.
You can easily afford these big time free agents if you want to. We don't think there's any reason why you shouldn't be able to, re-sign a Blake Snell and make a move for a Willie Adames and a Travis d'Arnaud and one other position potentially, whether you want to go for like a Santander or something like that, just to try to beef up the lineup and make it a semi-competitive team next season. So like you said, we don't really know what direction the team's going to go in, but one thing we do know is they got the money to spend to get whoever they want.
I think they could at least afford, a solid starter and an impact bat of some sport. Like just trying to be, even if it's like bare minimum, like I think that they've, and to your point, like I don't know if they will really feel like they have to get a starter. I think they would love to have Blake Snell back. I think they would love to, get a front end guy, but we'll see how willing they are to meet whatever contract demands they might have there. Plus, who might get involved, especially if, a team like LA, they decide they want another starter, or San Diego, or, there's a lot of teams that could get involved in that front. And same thing with Adames is like, if LA is really looking at shortstop, that gets trickier because they're just very appealing for players, as you mentioned earlier with Shohei. And I look at, Ha-Seong Kim, I think he's a big candidate for the Boris special of, 1-1 or something like that, to see if like, hey, he got healthy, now we'll hit free agency again. Or if he doesn't, he'll just have the extra year of security. It's tough, but I do think it's kind of, a guy like Adames, or as an example, or if they want to look at a guy like Santander, like I think at some point you've got to, put your money where your mouth is. And because I'm not a believer, I very much don't believe that it's like nobody wants to play in San Francisco. I'm a believer of nobody wants to play in San Francisco for the exact same money and years and everything that everyone else is offering, because a variety of factors. So, and the one guy that the Giants actually put the money on the table wanted to take it, and that was Correa. And it's, so to me, it's like if you actually outbid these teams, like I think players will come, but they just haven't really shown the willingness at the top of the market to do that with guys. So it's very interesting. I think a guy like Adames would fit multiple needs because he is a solid defensive shortstop. I know he had a down year this season, but track record wise, he's been pretty solid. And I think it's important to get an impact bat, if anything, because I don't want Bryce Eldridge to come up in a year, 2 years, whatever, opening day, I whatever point he comes up, I don't want him to come up and have nothing behind him. And then just, he gets nothing to hit, and it doesn't inspire any confidence. It's like, I would love to have a guy like Willy Adames, who has averaged 90 something RBIs for 3 straight seasons. Like, I would love to have him right behind Bryce, because then teams are going to be like, we at least got to pitch to this guy. Like, we can't just give him nothing to hit. So.
The one thing that stands out about what the Giants might do is that when prior to Matt Chapman signing his extension, I know he chatted with Buster Posey. There were varying stories as to what happened with that Matt Chapman extension and who played what role. One thing that was pretty solid on all sides was that Posey told Chapman that they plan to spend big. Like, I mean, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to go out and do it. But I don't think Posey's the type of guy who would just say that and not follow up on it. So I do think they're going to be pretty. I think they're going to be pretty aggressive this offseason. I think that's why they brought Posey in, because they didn't want to, bring in another analytical guy who's probably going to scale back for an offseason or two. They wanted somebody who's going to like invest in this team now, and I think Posey's that type of guy to do it. That's kind of my thought there.
For sure.
Yeah, and that's what makes this, from Ricky here, that's what makes that comment kind of interesting, because it kind of contrasts what Posey said to Chapman in the negotiations. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think the comment was that I didn't hear the comment exactly, or the quote exactly from Alex.
I have it right here, actually.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he says, quote unquote, regarding Chapman. So that's a month-long search that we're done. Matt Chapman is probably going to be their biggest target in the offseason, and he's back now. So a lot of their offseason heavy lifting is done.
And that could mean like,
it's kind of vague. It's kind of
vague. Yeah. It could just mean like he was their number one, like priority was just getting the extension done. I thought somebody had I hadn't listened to that pod. I thought someone mentioned that it was going to be the biggest contract that they would hand out. And I was like, I mean, 6 for 151, you're not willing to go above that. That might be tough to, I mean, you could still upgrade the roster with players that don't, Santander, I don't think gets bigger than that. Lee, I don't think gets bigger than that. I mean, even a guy like Max Fried might not get bigger than that, honestly, but like, I think you could, if they were just saying that's the biggest offer they put out or biggest deal they get done. But I don't think they're going to be, like Jeff said, I think they're going to be aggressive. Like it's they kind of have to with where they're at right now.
Yeah. I mean, that's where they committed to. They could have easily just scaled back and had somebody else
Yeah.
be the president of baseball operations. So I mean, if Pavlovich said that, that Chapman's their biggest move, I get that, and he has a great pulse on the organization. I still would be. I mean, they still have a lot of money to get to where they were spending this year, 2024. They still have a lot of money to spend before they even get close to that number. So I mean, they don't have to go out and get like a guy who's going to cost $200 million. They could still sign a
Exactly.
couple of guys to moderate sized contracts and still kind of like fill out the roster that way. Maybe that's what Pavlovich was saying, but I mean, again, I think
Yeah.
if Posey says that if he told Chapman they're going to spend, I think that's the intent at the very least. Whether they get people to take their money, that's always been the hard thing. But I think they're going to try and as they've done the past few off seasons, they're going to try and shop at the top of the market, and if not, they'll probably try and get creative and spend elsewhere.
Yeah. The one thing, and Dan and I, we did a Soto video the other day because we're like, hey, you know what? This is everybody. Every year it's the same thing. We all like pop up and we're like, we're ready to get hurt again. All right, let's go. And I basically was like, this is the one Soto video I'm doing unless he signs, because realistically it's probably not happening. But I mean, the one thing that with Soto, I feel like, and we both totally agree, is like you have to be aggressive and not let your entire offseason plans hinge on Juan Soto. Like that's the one thing that I don't think they did a great job of. It was always like, we're going to panic pivot after the big guy tells us no. And sometimes a lot of those guys already were off the market by the time that happened. And to me, like this should not be a financial issue. Like you shouldn't be saying, well, we can only spend this money, and if Soto takes it, then we can't afford it. To me, it should just be do what you would normally do if he wasn't on the market. And then if he turns around and says, yeah, I want to come here, then you just blow out the budget for a year. Like, I mean, it's easy for me to say it's not my money, but it's like, you're going to make all that money back on Juan Soto. I mean, we've all seen how the Giants market their stars. Like, it's not an issue. They will make the money just fine off of him. But I mean, what are your thoughts kind of like on, they will go big fish hunting, I'm sure, but just kind of, how they should approach the offseason in general with him out there.
I mean, any big market team has to be in the market for a guy like Juan Soto. I don't think the Giants are in any different position, so they're going to make an effort. Scott Boras is probably going to make him believe that Soto wants to go to the Giants, because that's what Boras tends to do with his clients, to paint this realistic picture of, hey, he wants to go play for you guys. If you guys offer this amount of money, oh, actually, we're going to use that contract offer to get him to where, like, it's probably going to be a little bit of bait and switch. I mean, Boris is really good at this. He had a bad off season last year, but more often than not, he gets his clients paid. So I think the Giants have to do their due diligence here, just because Juan Soto is just like a once in a generation type of player. And again, they're probably not going to land him. I think we could say we can speak with 99.5% certainty here, because it just feels like he's a really good fit for the Yankees or the Mets. It'd be surprising if he left New York one way or the other. I think it's probably going to be the Yankees or the Mets, and the Yankees, he's already spent a season there. It feels like he and Judge could be a dynamic duo for years to come. I'm not sure if that factors into his decision whatsoever. It could just be strictly financial. But they need to have, a plan in case they don't sign him, if and when they don't sign him.
He does seem like the kind of guy that will chase the biggest contract. Like, just comments he's made in the past, like where he's like, I'm not rolling out any teams. Like, he basically has kind of openly admitted, like, I'm going to where the money is. With some of his past comments. So,
and I mean, as he should, he's going to make, he's going to make whoever signs him is going to get a really good player for a long time. So it'll be well worth the investment. But I think the Giants need to have a plan B for when he does sign elsewhere, and be able to pivot quickly. And it wouldn't surprise me if Soto waits out the offseason, like many of Scott Boris's clients do. So the Giants will have plenty of time in that scenario to kind of plan the rest of the roster and, make an exception if Soto's still available. I mean, and hasn't signed, they could still go out hard and get him, but they can't really hinge their plan on signing Soto.
Yeah. I think that's been my biggest gripe for the last couple off seasons where, they've chased, the Judges and the Otanis, and when they miss out on that and they had their heart set on those guys, then, Farhan would kind of pivot and panic and go after, the Confortos, the Solaires and stuff like that. So I think that's key right there. If you get them, great. If you have a chance to get them, awesome. But don't make that your focal point of the offseason. There's too many holes to fill.
Yeah. So a couple of interesting trade candidates that I think are, one of them's kind of just recently popped out there. But one was talked about a lot last season that both could potentially fill in a need at short. What are your thoughts on if they were to try and swing a deal for like a Bo Bichette? And then the other one is it would be hilarious to me, honestly, if they did it, is with the Twins rumored to be selling if Carlos Correa ended up on the market.
Well,
I mean, honestly, it's only a 4-year deal and there's like zero risk beyond that, because for him to, vest any of those years, it's like playing at an MVP level almost. So, I mean,
yeah, I mean, the Twins deserve a lot of credit for working out that contract.
Yeah.
Because 2 teams passed on Correa, the Giants included. But the contract, the way it's set up, it's like Correa really has to earn those back end years. I mean, there's no guarantee after year 6, I think. Bo Bichette, I mean, yeah. I mean, Correa, I thought would have been, he would have been a great face of the franchise type of player. He was fantastic this year for the Twins, so I don't think they're I don't think they're disappointed at all by the amount of money that that they invested in him. I know he had kind of a rough second year with the Twins, if that makes sense. But Bo Bichette, I mean, he's coming off of a really down year, so I don't think the Giants would have to trade anything of substance. He's also in the final year of his contract, and he's pretty much said it. He's not going to re-sign with the Blue Jays, which is strange to say. But again, just given how much he struggled last year, and Bo Bichette, prior to last year, I thought he was like one of the better shortstops in baseball. Yeah. But I don't know what happened with his 2024 season that gives me cause for concern, because the Giants, they can't go out and trade for a shortstop and that shortstop not perform. I mean, the rest of the roster around them isn't strong enough, so there's a lot of risk there. But I mean, some of it just depends on the cost. If it's like a mid-level minor leaguer, then maybe that's that's the move that they make. I mean, Bichette's gonna be making I don't know what he made in arbitration last year. 17 million.
Projected. Well, actually, I think he signed an extension.
Oh,
didn't they buy out the last 2 years? Dan, do you know?
Yeah, it's 3 years, 33 million.
Exactly.
Through 2025. So cool. Not a huge cost there. Not a huge financial cost for a player of that caliber. I was thinking if it was like 20 million a year, I'm like, well, maybe he's a non-tender candidate. But yeah, I mean, it'd be. I'd probably pass on him if you're asking my opinion. Just given how poorly he did in 2024, wouldn't be opposed to seeing what the cost for Correa is.
Yeah.
Who threw that idea? Was it Andrew Baggerly?
For Correa or
Correa?
I think maybe he did. I know it got floated out there. Like as soon as the Twins were talking about selling, I saw a few people going, well, are they going to look to cut some costs out there? Correa's making 30-something million right now. And I think that was just kind of an idea floated out there. I know the injury history is a concern, but I mean, he posted like a 4-WAR season in like 86 games last season. Yeah. I mean, he was pretty awesome, like Jeff said.
Yeah, he was solid.
Yeah, but Bichette's a weird one for me because could what he was last season just really be where he's headed? I mean, it's certainly possible. I know people mentioned that he dealt with some injuries throughout the year. I don't know specifics on that and what they might have been, and how they might have impacted them. Like I know a couple of years ago, Matt Chapman had the finger injury for most of the season, and you saw his offensive numbers kind of go really down after like the month of April.
If I'm not mistaken, Bichette he had a nagging hamstring injury this past year.
Okay, I mean, so could have impacted him. And the part I struggle with is it's not often that you see. You know, I remember looking at a lot of his spray chart metrics and like I mean, obviously his like exit velocity was down a little bit and some of the stuff, but a lot of the like swing decisions, you know, where he was hitting the ball, the fly balls, line drives, all that, like everything was pretty similar to what he had done previously. Um, and to me, I'm like, I have a hard time believing a 26-year-old just forgot how to hit. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's that too.
so I kind
Yeah.
of wondered if it was just like, hey, he just had a really bad year. And I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think it would be exciting because I think at his best, he's one of the best number 2 hitters in baseball, like pure number 2
Yeah.
hitters, not this guy that gets put in that spot.
You see, I try to be a little, you know, hopeful and optimistic about Bichette. Maybe because I'm a little biased. I've been a big fan of his. I trade for him whenever I play the
Fair.
show. So it's like I like Bichette a lot, and you know, so I try to look at 24 as like a fluke / injured year for him. My biggest thing is he's going to cost an arm and a leg, and he's only got 1 more year left on his deal. So it's like, do you try to make a move for a guy like that, and it possibly turns to a rental after you just forked up? You know, you already have, let's face it, a mid farm system, and you just gave up a lot of your top guys to get a guy in a 1-year rental deal while you're kind of a rebuilding team. You know what I mean? So that's my concern when I look at it.
I don't think the cost to Toronto would be as high. I think it'd probably be a top 10 prospect if I had to guess, at least in your system. But I don't think the cost to Toronto would be high. But I think you make that deal, the goal is going to be to extend him. And I don't think an extension would come cheap because if it's not a worthwhile extension, I would imagine Bo Bichette is going to say, I'm going to bet on myself and just play out the year. Just my guess. Like it's going to be a 10 for $250 million extension or something crazy to just get him to sign it. And that, like Jeff said, that's a huge risk.
Yeah.
On a guy that just had a really, really poor season. So
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I'd be excited if they got him, but it's one I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. But
I'd be happy going into the 25 season without a Nick Ahmed on the team. That's shortstop. So you give me anyone besides that, I'm going to be excited.
That is my most proud tweet of last season. Was after Nick Ahmed hit that home run for the Dodgers on the Giants. I sent out a tweet that says Nick Ahmed still helping the Giants lose games in 2024.
That's good.
I like the guy. I don't hate the guy. It was just funny. He was not, it's like we talked about earlier. He's just not what they needed. He was better fit for on a team that could hide his bat and things like that. But anybody in the chat, if you guys have any questions that you want to ask Jeff, I'm sure we'll be wrapping this up here really shortly. But if you guys have anything that you guys want to ask him before we get off here, definitely throw it out there.
Here's one I wanted to get Jeff's thought on that Grant just put in on here. Jeff, you can see on the screen. Where Grant said, do you think they'll ever have the willingness to take on bad contracts to bring in certain desired talent in return, or ownership would ever do that?
Kind of like the Zach Kozar trade is what that's referencing.
Yeah, I like that.
It's an interesting idea, and somebody like Jordan Montgomery is the type of player who, the Diamondbacks were just not happy with his performance in 2024. I haven't heard an owner speak as candidly as the Diamondbacks owner did, which kind of sucks if you're Jordan Montgomery. Is going to be, his contract is going to be with them unless they can move him in 2025. I don't see that they're going to be too willing to do that because they had some flexibility to take on Kozar's contract. It's not that they don't have the financial flexibility now. It's that they need to use that flexibility to better the roster than 5 or 6 years ago when they weren't really trying to compete at that point. They were just trying to build something up. I'd be surprised if they did that. That's kind of where I'm at there.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of in agreement with that kind of thought process for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think you're dead on when you say like they have the flexibility, but it needs to be utilized towards upgrading the roster. And I actually, it's funny because to a sense, or like to a degree, Farhan was willing to do that because he would try and get out of one bad contract and kind of take another bad contract back in order to do it. You look at the Robbie Ray for Haniger trade, and I'm still a guy that, Robbie Ray has a track record of eating up 170 to 180, 190 innings. And if he's healthy and fully recovered from Tommy John next season, like I'm a believer that he could give you 160 to 180 good innings. Not Cy Young expectations. I'm not going to put that kind of outlier year that he had on as an expectation, but I think he could be a quality, number 3 in your rotation and just eat up a bunch of innings. And I think that's what this team is really needed, because I do believe that they have a good bullpen. I think they have a bullpen that got kind of, gassed by the end of May for multiple seasons in a row. But I do believe that they have a good bullpen if they can just find some starters that can eat up some innings going forward. So just an interesting spot they're in. But I'm going to kind of circle back kind of to the beginning really quick. Before we get done here, we talked a ton about different pitchers in the system that you liked. We kind of glossed over the position player side. Interested, are there any guys on the position player side that you really like in the system?
Aside from Bryce Eldridge,
The obvious.
I mean, there's Diego Velasquez, who's a middle infielder, probably more of a second baseman than a shortstop, but a guy who could really hit. I mean, he was in his age 20 season, doing more than just treading water in Double-A this year. So switch hitter, line drive, swing, sprays the ball all over the field. Good contact hitter. Probably better suited for second base in my opinion from what I've seen. Just not the range and the arm to be able to stick at shortstop, but maybe somebody who could be a spot starter there. I thought he had a really nice season, and probably a season that was overlooked because he doesn't really have that standout tool, but a guy who's really a mature hitter for his age. So that, I think he was a pleasant surprise for the Giants this year.
Yeah. I love that you brought up Diego because Dan knows I've been saying Cody, I love that guy.
Cody raves about Diego.
Yeah. Good hitter.
I love his approach. I love that it's kind of, it's kind of that old school approach. And I do appreciate when some guys have a little bit of that where it's like they know what they are as a player and they don't try and be something they're not. That's how I felt about Matos last season. It was like he was trying to be something he's not. All season, and I just loved watching Diego up there just spraying balls all over the field and hitting line drives, and he's got plus speed and he uses it, and he's got enough pop that he'll occasionally put one over someone's head, and I think he only hit like 4 home runs, but I love the fact that I watch him and I go, this guy could be a really good defender at second base. He could be a high 200s hitter. I think you need guys like that in the lineup. Not every guy's going to be hitting 25 home runs or anything like that. You need the guys that are going to set the table for the rest and, be really good in situational at bats and things like that. And especially after we watched the Giants put together one of the worst situational hitting teams I've ever personally seen. I told Dan, I was like, one of these days I'm going to actually go back and see how many times they failed to convert a runner from third with less than 2 outs and like what their percentage was, because I can't find that statistic everywhere, but it's just a lot of effort to do it.
Yeah.
But what do you think about a guy like Bo? Oh, go ahead.
They need a little more, like, I know it's kind of old school to say this, but they just need a little more contact in the lineup. And Velasquez is that type of hitter, a guy who doesn't swing and miss a whole lot. Puts the ball in play. Maybe has like Donovan Solano like offensive upside. That's how I see him. A guy who doesn't hit for a ton of power, but just good situational hitter. A guy who sprays the ball around the field. Good hitter. Bo Davidson. I mean, it's hard for me to evaluate how he looked, because he was playing against low A pitching. That, in fairness to Davidson, that was probably the best competition he had faced up until that point. You see some college hitters who, when they get out of James Tibbs is probably an example, who once he got to San Jose, he probably had faced better competition up until that point. But Bo Davidson was, I think he was signed as an undrafted free agent out of like a community college. So it's not like he was facing the best competition in the country. So, there was a development curve there. I mean, there's been a lot of positive buzz about him after this season. When I watch him hit, I don't know if you see this, but it kind of reminds me of Jason Hayward to some extent. But yeah, he uses the entire field. He has power at all fields. If that's his strength, then he should stick with that. But if he could pull the ball a little more, I think that would probably be a better outcome for him. But right now he's a guy his power is to the gaps, or to right center, left center. It'd be nice for him to translate that a little bit more toward right field, but we'll see. He had a really nice year.
Yeah, for sure.
He was a lot toolsier than the normal guy you would see go undrafted out of wherever whatever community college or JUCO or whatever he came out of. Like, he was a lot toolsier than I think you would normally see a guy that went undrafted. I feel like when I think of like an undrafted, I think of a kind of a grinder. Like, this is like almost a Wade Meckler type, not Wade Meckler because obviously I think he was like an 8th round pick, but like. Yep. Almost like that kind of type of player. And you see a guy like Bo, and he's got like pretty good power, really good speed, pretty solid defensively from what I've seen. And it's just kind of interesting that he was an undrafted player. It's like, how did this guy not catch the eyes of somebody to, even if he was a late round pick? Kind of interesting. But you got any other players? I got one more I'm going to ask him about that's obviously on the Major League Club. But do you have anybody else, Dan?
Not in particular. I was just going to say it's been cool watching the Fall League. I don't know if you guys have been seeing the highlights of all that.
Yeah.
Bo and Bryce, they look great. It's just awesome to see them get that kind of competition. But no one in particular. Would have been a good question for Ricky. Wish he was here. We're going to pour one out for my boy.
Yeah. The home run Bryce hit to left center. I cracked up because what did I text you guys? I just wish I had the kind of power. I knew what it was like to have the kind of power to hit the ball the opposite way and know out of the box it was gone. Like it's just crazy to me how much pop he has.
His opposite field pop is just insane. You see the double that he hit down there as well, or it was just like a foot from being out, but it was literally straight to left field. I'm just like, this dude's got just insane power.
He hit like 6 home runs down the left field line last season, or 6 or 7. It was crazy.
And guys, he's barely going into his age 20 season. It's insane.
Yeah. Hopefully he's that guy. But the last guy I was going to ask you about, and then we'll call it a night, is what do you think of a guy like Casey Schmidt with Matt Chapman getting the extension? I felt like he looked a lot. I thought he looked pretty good at second base overall. I'm just giving kind of my thoughts, and then I want to hear what you think. Is he looked pretty good at second? I mean, I don't really like him at short, but they could throw him there for a game or two if they needed to in a pinch. Yeah. I think he's an excellent kind of contingency. Chapman's been very durable his whole career, but you never know when a guy's going to break a finger or something and miss time. And I think having a guy like Casey Schmidt where you can take you lose very little defensively if you have to play him over there at third base. Yeah. I cracked up when people were seeing some of the plays he made in Baltimore when Chapman was on his paternity leave. People were like, oh my God. And I'm like, he's been doing this in Sacramento all season. Like he makes all the plays Chapman makes. I watch all these games. Like he's that good defensively. He can be a special defender. And it just cracked me up. But I thought, it was really good to see him kind of tap into the power. It was obviously a lot was to the pull side. But to me, like he did make some strides with the swing decisions. Incremental, they weren't like all of a sudden he's drastically better, but I saw him make strides, and I just kind of wonder if he's going to be an odd man out, or if you think that he really could be either contend for starting at second base or something like that, or maybe they view him as a utility guy and like I said, a contingency if a guy goes down. It's kind of what your thoughts are.
Yeah, he had a really strong finish to the year. His overall numbers look strong. I've seen a 760 OPS. The thing that stands out, and that's always been an issue, is the swing decisions, and the result of that is typically a low on base percentage. He had a 283 on base percentage this year, and to me, that's too low to really be an impact starter. You really have to offset that with a lot of power, and maybe he is that guy. But I think I think he's going to get a chance to kind of prove what he can do, because he finished the year so nicely that it behooves the Giants to see what he can do. It probably won't be at third base, but to your point, third base is his best position. It's something he does quite well, and it feels like if he's playing second base, that almost feels like he's being underutilized at that point, because he's just he's so good defensively at third base. There's a reason defensively is compared to Matt Chapman.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting to see how that bat develops with longer look. He only had 100 plus plate appearances this year. But then I don't think shortstop's going to be his position, and I think you and I agree there, Cody. But it'd be interesting to see how the Giants view Tyler Fitzgerald, because when you look at his season, there was two different Tyler Fitzgeralds. There was that crazy run he went on. There was that 6-week run where
insane.
He was just, it was insane. It was probably one of the biggest surprises from a Giants prospect that I can remember. And then there was when the league adjusted to him, and he was actually really a below average hitter. And if that carries on into next year, I think he's the incumbent at second base, or the incumbent at one of the middle and field positions. But if that carries on in the next year, maybe a guy like Schmidt slots into second base and starts seeing some time there, especially if he, hits like he did at the end of this year. It was nice to see him, finally get some success. The improvements he has made in terms of swing decisions and limiting his chase rate have very much been incremental. But there has been progress made, and maybe there's more progress that can be made. So that's kind of where I'm at right there. The approach still has to improve, but there might be enough there for him to be, to be a pretty decent, everyday player at second base if he can hit for enough power.
Yeah. And I wonder, I wish I could throw out, when I go on a baseball savant or something like that, I wish I could just throw out that first stint, because, when he first came up in, I want to say it was May, I mean, he swung at everything. His chase rate was 55% at one point I looked, and it very much looked like a guy that felt like it was going to be his one shot. And, the way Farhan treated a lot of guys, I get that mindset. It looked like a guy that was I'm not going down watching pitches go by me. I'm going to swing at everything that gets thrown to me. And the next time he came up, it looked a lot better. And it just seemed like if you could throw out that first one, I actually feel like his chase rate and everything was probably pretty decent overall. It was still probably high, but it was much better than it at the end of the year. But even at the end of the year, everything kind of improved a little. And it's funny because, like you mentioned with Fitzgerald, who I was joking that he was Barry Lamar Fitzgerald for a week. When he was hitting everything out of the yard, it was kind of insane. But I have concerns. I look at a guy like Fitz, and I look at a guy like Schmidt, and I love what Fitz brings with the speed and all that, and that aspect of his game. But I look at a guy that had an above average chase rate, but then his whiff and K percentages were both 30+%. And I'm like, okay, so this guy swings and misses at a ton of balls in the zone. And then Casey, you're looking at a guy that swings at too much stuff out of the zone, but all the contact rates and things like that are better. And it's just to me, I look at it as, I feel like it's easier to get a guy to control the zone better eventually, improve on that, than it is to get a guy to make contact more on pitches in the zone. Yeah, that's where it's really tough. And I like Schmidt. I hope they give him, another good look next season. Kind of weird skill for him, but I almost feel like he's the best tagger on the team. That was the one thing he did at second base. That was he was so quick with tags over there that I thought it was just kind of an underrated skill that you don't get a lot of credit for, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
So, All right. Yeah, I don't think nobody else really threw anything out there. So I think that's a good spot to wrap it up, unless you got anything else, Dan, before we go.
I'm good. Just want to say thanks for hopping on, Jeff. You're super cool, man. We appreciate you.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It was great to chat Giants baseball on a Friday in October. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like we haven't gotten to do that since 2021.
Right.
So it'd be really great to like make this a more regular thing, but it is what it is. Thank you so much for jumping on. This was awesome getting to talk some Giants baseball with you. I'm sure we'll definitely reach out again at some point this offseason, try and get you back out here.
I'd be happy to do it again.
Awesome. Hopefully Ricky will have to join next time.
That's good. That'd be awesome.
He said I think he said he played in like a men's league with you at some point. Maybe
yeah.
You might know him.
Yeah. So he and I never interacted in the league, but we played against each other. He played for the A's. I played for the Brewers. His team kicked the shit out of my team every time.
But probably why they're playing in Arizona right now on some thing.
But we never talked or I vaguely knew of the players on the other team, but that was about it. So I remember him being a pretty damn good pitcher, though.
Yeah, that's what he said. He's pitching down there. I don't know.
Yeah,
if you're watching, Ricky, good luck tomorrow, man.
So. I think they won 11-0 a day. So I think they killed it. So
they're like 5-0 or something down there. I don't know. Doing pretty well.
Good for you, Rick.
Yeah. But everybody, hope you enjoyed this. Thanks again to Jeff. Go check out all his stuff. If you're not already following him on X, it's an awesome follow. He will get you laughing, like I do, particularly with his major league references. They always crack me up. And so definitely follow him and go check out all the stuff on Around the Foghorn, his Pitchers Park podcast with Brooke Knudsen, all that stuff. It's all great content. So you guys should check that out. For anybody that's stuck around till now, if you enjoy stuff like this, let us know if you want more stuff like this. We have a lot of fun doing it, but if you do enjoy it, like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff.
Road to 1K.
Yeah, we're on our way. We're kind of pushing close to 900 right now. So
there we go.
Creeping up.
Yeah, it's growing pretty quick, a lot faster than I thought it would. So it's a lot of fun. And I just did it to be able to talk Giants baseball with people and get people like you on. It's just a ton of fun. So
it was a blast.
So all right, everybody, appreciate you all. We'll catch you next time. I'm sure Dan and I will do a live next week, so we will talk to you all then. And other than that, you'll probably see a few other videos get kind of pumped out there in the next week. All right, see you.
Right on. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man.
Chat soon.